bill.
Call Nikki Wagner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to support this exclusive economic zone and continental shelf environmental effects bill at its third reading. And it's very interesting listening to Gareth Hughes talking about the bill. It sounds like it's a totally different piece of legislation, because this is a really important bill and it's been a long time coming. We've probably been talking about it for nearly 2 decades. Now, as we know, our EEZ is enormous. That's our exclusive economic zone, 20 times larger than the land mass of New Zealand, and it's one of the largest and most diverse exclusive economic zones in the world. And we have control over it. It's ours because of the United Nations Conventions of Law of the Sea. And that convention gives us both rights and responsibilities. The right to access resources in that area, and there are significant resources there that can be important to our economic future, but also the responsibilities to look after our marine environment. Now, the purpose of this Act is to promote the sustainable management of natural resources in this area, the sustainable management, and that's what Kiwis embrace. Kiwis love the ocean, and I do agree with Gareth Hughes, that's absolutely true. Mostly we interact with our coastal oceans, but our deep sea ocean, for a country that is a small speck, is incredibly important. And so we embrace the fact that they must be managed sustainably. This will give us the framework to do just that. The bill provides a framework for environmental management to ensure any activities in this area, and we don't expect a large number of activities, maybe up to 12 consents a year, but those activities must use best practice, they must avoid or remedy or mitigate any possible environmental damage. And we believe that this legislation does indeed meet our international obligations under the United Nations Conventions for Law of the Seas, as do our advisers, as do MFAT, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Trade, who negotiated the United Nations Conventions for Law of the Sea. Certainly it meets this legislation, much more so than when Labour was in government for 9 years and did nothing to legislate in the marine environment, although during that time they drilled 16 deep sea wells. So we're far better off with this legislation to protect our environment than they were who did nothing. Now, the activities that will be covered under this legislation include petroleum exploration and production, including structures, seabed mining, marine scientific research, submarine telecommunication cables, and any other activities that may arise in the future. And that's an important catch-all because technology is changing significantly and we must err on precaution with dealing with these new technologies for any work that's done in this area. Now, the legislation aligns with the Resource Management Act, and that was an important discussion because the first 12 miles of our ocean are covered by the RMA, and so there is a transition between those 12 miles and the EEZ and continental shelf. So this legislation uses the same type of characterisation and categorisation as permitted, discretionary and prohibitive activities. But the default in this case is for a discretionary activity. So unless that activity is categorised or deemed as permitted or it has a consent, it must go through that process. Now, Parliament has been working on this bill for months. Actually, we've been talking about it for years, and there have been many changes and much debate in Select Committee and with the Minister. So it was very pleasing when Dr Jan Wright, the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, came out and put a press release saying that she felt that this is an important legislation and that the government is to be congratulated on bringing it into existence and doing so by way of a wider conversation. She also said in that press release that she's satisfied that the legislation will provide significant protection for New Zealand's EEZ. I'd like to thank everybody who worked on this bill. I'd like to thank the two ministers that were involved, the past minister, the Honourable Dr Nick Smith, who formulated this legislation over a long time, and our present minister, the Honourable Amy Adams, who's brought this bill through the House. I'd also like to thank all the advisors and the drafters and the clerk of the House and her team, and finally to all the members of the Select Committee for robust debate. We worked hard on this bill and I think we improved that. So I'm delighted to see it passing today. I believe it will protect the marine environment of the EEZ and the continental shelf, and that it's something that New Zealanders are very keen to support. I'm really disappointed that some parties will be voting against this bill, because by voting against it, it means that the EEZ and continental shelf will have no protection, nothing to look after that very special and diverse marine environment. New Zealand is a far better position with this legislation than it's ever been in the past or ever be in the future without it. Thank you, Mr.
Andrew Williams.
Thank you.